Welcome back, everybody. This is Warchant TV alongside the managing editor of Warchant.com. He's Ira Schafel. My name is Tom Lang. And today, as you can see in that lower third graphic, that's what they call it in the business, we're talking about the cornerbacks, the final position preview for Florida State as we have run a full series. If you haven't checked those out yet, head to Warchant TV. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. Check out all those videos and throw us a like underneath this particular video. So, Ira, we've had a lot of defensive breakdowns, off-season reports, summer reports, whatever you want to call them. And a lot of those positions have it fixed at the top of the two deep. Like, here are your starters. For Florida State, there are going to be three starters at corner because in this day and age of college football, you run so much nickel. We know who two of those guys are going to be. It's Duke Cooper, Omarion Cooper, and Kevin Knowles. What are some of the things that maybe you saw from those two guys in spring and reasons why they're entrenched as starters in our minds heading into fall camp?
Kevin Knowles, just going back to last spring when he was an early enrollee in the spring of 2021, came in and really impressed everybody, had an impressive spring, then goes into preseason camp and they started working him at that nickel back or slot corner position. And, took it only took about 3 or 4 weeks before they put him in the starting lineup, which is, really impressive. And it was a huge move for that secondary because it allowed them to move Jamie Robinson back to safety. But Kevin Knowles is a guy that made plays. I'm like, in the spring when he came in as an early enrollee, you didn't even have to know anything. You just could see him make plays on the football. And I think he had an interception in the spring game. I think just made play after play, and then carried it over to the season and had a really nice freshman season starting on a defense that got much better once he got in the starting lineup. Amari Cooper was even more kind of surprising because he was not an early enrollee. He was not one of the highest rated DBs in that class. He actually was probably in the bottom half maybe of that class of DBs. And then he comes in, misses part of preseason camp because had an ailment, and then gets kind of healthy towards the end of camp, starts making some plays. We kind of wrote him off last preseason because he missed so much of camp and he wasn't here during the spring. But, man, he just got better and better and then worked his way into the lineup. And then, sure enough, he's in the starting lineup is at the other cornerback spot opposite Jarvis Brownlee and played exceptionally well. Had the pick against Clemson, the pick against Miami, just a real playmaker. Both of those guys, I think what's exciting about them is not only do they seem to be really competent coverage guys, but they make plays on the football. And it's been a long time since we've seen Florida State cornerbacks make plays on the football.
Yeah, we just did the safeties report, and watching Akeem Dent play Miami versus Akeem Dent play any game in September, it's a different guy. And that whole crew, whether it was corners or safeties, they got downhill and they made plays on the football by the time the Miami game was around. I remember watching Amari Cooper and Clemson saying, who is that just came down with the football? And then by the time you got to the Miami game, you're like, oh, I know who that is. Cooper's got that locked down. I wanted to address something, Ari, because I've talked about this a little bit with Kevin Knowles. Preseason, pre-spring, before that camp started, Coach Marcus Woodson, the position coach, said that they were thinking about maybe working Kevin Knowles outside to free up maybe a role for somebody in the slot. But it feels like after spring, Kevin Knowles' place is going to be in the slot this year, right?
Yeah, I mean, they won't rule it out that Knowles might end up being an outside corner, and maybe he will. I mean, there's an opportunity there. The reason we're only saying that those are the only two sure things is because that other cornerback position was pretty much wide open all spring, and we think it's going to be wide open going into the fall. They've even been tinkering around looking in the portal a little bit for a possible corner if they got an experienced junior college guy or transfer portal guy. So, clearly they don't feel great about that. So if he had the ability, you'd say, yeah, but sometimes that slot corner position is more difficult sometimes than playing the outside corner, even though it's minimized. A lot of people think of it as the third corner. That guy does not have a boundary to work off of. He's the receiver could go either way. A lot of times he's going up against a bigger receiver, and a lot of your corners don't have that great size, or they won't be able to run. So it takes a unique guy to play that role, and I think it's one of those things. I think Kevin Knowles is so good in that role that why mess with a good thing? Now he may be tempted to push for the outside role because it does seem like those guys are valued higher, maybe at the NFL level, guys who are seen as one-on-one, lockdown corners. But for Florida State's purposes right now, I think that's where he's going to be.
And also he's somebody who can play near the line of scrimmage because he's not afraid of contact. He's not afraid to get downhill and make tackles. Okay, so we like one of the outside corners, be it boundary or field for Omarion. You like the slot corner, probably for Kevin Knowles. We'll see what fall camp bears out. You're right. That leaves one job open. So we'll start with the guy that surprised us. He was wearing a black jersey when Florida State was doing the tour of duty workouts. And he's like, oh, that's great because that's the highest honor at that time. Good to see he's invested. Flash forward about 3 weeks. Reynardo Green was one of the leaders in the clubhouse. He's one of the guys coming out of spring where you'd say he might be competing for that third starting job. What did you see out of Reynardo in spring, and where do you think he stands in the pecking order heading into fall camp?
Yeah, he might have been the surprise of the spring just because, the year before, if you go back to Reynardo's freshman year, he played a lot at corner as a true freshman. Then he moves to safety and kind of takes over a starting role. But then last year didn't play particularly well early in the year, and then he got injured. And then he really kind of just disappeared. And when we'd be at practice, sometimes you can tell when a guy's injured how engaged they are. Are they getting mental reps? Are they there every day and locked in, chomping at the bit to get their chance to get back out there? And I'm not blaming him for this. It just you never got the sense. Now, he may have realized that I can't get back healthy, or I don't know what the issue was, but you never felt like, okay, he's this close to coming back. And then, you go into the spring and you start thinking, well, maybe he's been here 3 or 4 years. Maybe he's a guy that looks to transfer. And then, like you said, comes out, has a great tour of duty, then goes into spring practice. They move him back to cornerback. And it just seems like that's where he's better suited to play. I was not in love with him as a safety, even though he'd earned a lot of playing time. I liked him more as a corner this spring. I don't know that he's got that job. I don't even know if he's got the inside track on that job. He might. Yeah. And like we said, they're still looking at other options. They've even been, flirting with guys in the transfer portal. So they clearly don't feel great about that position. But it's an impressive story for him to come back, have that good spring. And, after a good summer, maybe he is that guy going into this preseason. But it's an important position because you're so good everywhere else on defense. You're pretty, like you said, you're pretty set at linebacker. You got a lot of options there. You got a lot of options at safety. You're pretty set up front, certainly in the interior of the line. But that one cornerback spot, you don't want to have a liability when you've got a defense that's pretty good.
Yeah, a couple of guys, I'll group them together because I think they're similar players in what they can bring and then maybe their shortcomings. It's Jerriann Jones, who's been here at Florida State for some time. He was a starter for a lot of the season last year, whereas number 7, and then transfer Greedy Vance, who, and here's why I think both of these players are similar. They got a similar build to them, Ira, but they both like to play more physically at the line of scrimmage. And then at least from what I saw in spring from Vance, it looks a little bit like what Jerriann Jones has brought to the table in live action for Florida State in the fall, which is if you don't get your hands on a guy, you may be in trouble. It may not be the most consistent coverage that you're going to see. So I think these are both depth players at this point. Greedy Vance, again, you got to give him the benefit of the doubt that he might not be completely up to speed on the scheme, and that might make him a faster player come fall. But I think these are two guys who are more in the depth conversation than, maybe fighting for starters reps. Would you agree with that or no?
I would say that, Jerriann Jones is definitely going to try to prove you wrong on that. And I'm sure obviously Greedy Vance as well. Jerriann Jones has ability. And I've talked to people around the program, talked to various people who think he can be a good cornerback at Florida State, maybe better than he's played so far, but it just hasn't materialized. If you think back to last year, he missed so much of preseason camp with a hand injury. He had a cast on for a while. And then, he had some big plays. He did have that one interception in the end zone, which was a big play. And he's had some plays, some moments, but like you said, he's also gotten beat plenty. And that's, obviously a concern. Of those two, I would see him more in the running for a starting job. Greedy Vance did play a lot at Louisville, and he's a guy that has a lot of confidence, plays physically. I mean, there's some nice things to like about him. But like you said, you wonder, they get pretty handsy at practice, and sometimes you wonder if you're not allowed to do that in a game, will it translate?
Yeah, ain't no contact conference. That's why I just came up with an acronym for the ACC. I don't know how well that's going to play. That'll be a concern for Jamie Robinson too, but we know that Jamie can cover in the open field. We'll see if Greedy Vance brings that to the table. Before we get to the two young guys, an interesting player. He's not that old. He's only been on campus for so long, and somebody that I've seen on Warchant TV in the chats. Lots of questions are on the boards. Lots of questions about Demori Tate. What do you think about where Demori Tate's game is right now?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, he's a guy that everybody asks about because he was so highly recruited. And then if you see him just looking at him physically and you say, well, man, that guy,
Yep.
You know, he looks like what an NFL cornerback should look like, and it just hasn't materialized. He sat out his first year to do academics, and then you know, it seemed like there's been times where he hasn't always been on the same page with the coaching staff. Like maybe they've had things that they wanted to see him do, and he wasn't very coachable, and they kind of butted heads from times. But I did think this spring you saw some real positive steps forward in that area, and it seemed like you could tell Mike Norvell really trying to let him know that they want him to succeed. Like they want him to be the player he could be. They're not just trying to give him a hard time just for the sake of giving him a hard time. And so when he would make a good play, you'd see them really encourage him and try to kind of get him, you know, heading in the right direction, because he does have a ton of talent. But for me right now, yeah, I would say it's probably going to be hard to expect him to be in the two deep. And the bigger concern is, you know, you've got some of those young guys coming, and they brought in two really impressive young corners. And so, you know, is he going to be able to fight them off as he tries to kind of establish himself?
And those two corners, let's get to them. One was an early both were early enrollees, but this is why it's important. Sam McCall, he was the first name that faxed in his LOI on National Signing Day. I think it was like 7:30 in the morning, and Sam McCall's name is in there. Then a surprise on signing day. Late in the process, he got warmed up to Florida State. He did not have him in his top 5 or top 3. That's Zaria Thomas, who personally, as a football fan, I fell in love with Ira from the workouts. I was thinking that dude is smooth. If he has any instinct at all, that dude moves very fluidly. There could be some really good players in this class, Ira. And at the cornerback position, those might be the top 2 that have come in for the class of 2022 and Sam McCall and Zaria Thomas. Really good stuff, especially from Thomas in spring camp.
Yeah, they're both really impressive, and you know, very different recruiting processes. Sam McCall committed early, and then there were just constant concerns. Is he going to stick? Is he going to stick? Is Alabama trying to get involved? Florida was trying to get involved. Is he going to stick? And then, as you said, signing day, he's the first guy that sends his fax in. Zaria Thomas was the exact opposite. He had written off Florida State last summer. They thought there was no chance they were going to get him, but they kept working, and then the stars aligned. You had coaching changes at Florida and LSU and Oklahoma, and suddenly, all of a sudden, Florida State is the familiar school, and they did a great job of reeling him in. And you know, we all knew he was going to be a nice player, but as you said, I mean, he far exceeded, I think, what anybody expected this spring. I mean, he looks like a guy. It's, you know, Corey will give me a hard time when I say it. I'll give Corey a hard time when he says it. You might have said it as well. He's a guy that kind of looks like a Jalen Ramsey physically, just kind of, you know, the length and some of the athleticism. He's probably not to that level, but man, he's an impressive young guy, and seems really smart. His brother played at Georgia Tech. He's got another brother played college football. He's got a lot of football knowledge. And yeah, if you had to put money on one of them to possibly play this season, I would probably put money on Zaria Thomas.
Yep.
But Sam McCall's talented too. I mean, he's a really talented football player and a physical kid. And those two kids are going to be a factor. I don't know that they'll win. Either one's going to win the starting job this fall. You'd prefer not to have that happen, just like you would have preferred not to have 2 true freshmen starting last year. But as you said, they've proven they'll play the best player, and those guys may be it.
Remember also, at the bottom of this video, for the partner piece we have on Warchant.com, if you want to read more about the cornerbacks and more about Florida State football, click the link below, and you'll be all set heading to Warchant.com. For the managing editor of Warchant.com, Ira Schoffel, my name is Tom Lang. I butchered that ending, but we edited it out. You didn't see that, did you? All right. We'll talk to you next time on Warchant TV.